One of the most important colors in the garden, obviously, is green. And what says green more than a gorgeous lawn? We're talking tough turf, back in 30 seconds. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home. Now, this is a show about blurring the lines between inside and out and creating beautiful outdoor living spaces, all in harmony with nature. Now, in today's show, what we're going to talk about is the floor or the carpeting of the garden home. We're going to talk about turf grasses, and we're going to talk about something that's very exciting to me, some of the ornamental grasses that can really jazz up your garden. Aren't their plumes dancing in the wind just amazing? We'll start with tips from a golf course expert about what you need to know to have a healthy lawn. And then we'll explore some environmentally friendly approaches to weed control. So let's get started as we take a look at some of the turf and ornamental grasses we're using here at the Garden Home Retreat. For now, at least, this is the most manicured lawn at the Garden Home Retreat, and it's down here in the vegetable garden. For good reason, it provides a lush green path to walk all the way through the center of the vegetable garden. Now, if you remember this space, not too long ago it looked bleak and barren. The raised beds were in and starting to host a variety of plants, but the garden still looked empty. Then we added the turf to the center of the path, and presto, the change was instantaneous. The intense green carpet captured your attention, and as the flowers matured and spilled over with abundance, it made the entire site really look like a garden. As we move from the vegetable garden up onto this flower terrace, you can see another kind of grass in action. Isn't this gorgeous? This is a pennisetum. It's part of a big family of grasses that are used as ornamentals, or fountain grasses as they're commonly called. Now, we're going to get more into ornamental grasses a little later in the show, but first let me just tell you why I think this is so beautiful here. This pennisetum, in contrast with that Sedona coleus, is just a cold knockout. And if you love that color, you might even be interested in the giant burgundy fountain grass we have growing just down that way, associated with yet another coleus, one that's sort of lava red. You see, what I like to do is contrast or juxtapose this ethereal, beautiful, light grass to something that's solid and leafy like the coleus. They make really good bedfellows. Creating a sense of entry is an important aspect of garden design, and here at the Garden Home Retreat, what we have are a pair of entry pavilions and then this set of double gates that bring you in a long drive that take you up to the farm and the house site. Now, last fall when we started working the ground around here, we realized that we had some problems on our hands. Erosion of good topsoil is a problem across the entire country. It's not good for the environment when topsoil is being washed down into bodies of water. We've got a real problem here, and I've taken several measures to try to hold the wash back. We've sown it with grass seed, but it's still not holding. I even put these bales of straw, but I've got an idea that I think will work. What I'm doing here is covering an entire area that's prone to wash with this fabric, which is a loose blend of wood product with a mesh over it. You just roll it out on the ground. You may be wondering, well, how do you keep it in place? Well, this is what I think is so ingenious. It comes with these staples, which are biodegradable. And after about 6 months, they disappear. So we prepared the soil by simply raking it down. We sowed fescue over the entire area very generously and then rolled out the fabric. Okay, now I'd like to show you the same area after 7 months. Now, what you can see here is the grass has taken hold and it's stabilized all of the loose soil around here thanks to that germination blanket. You see, the blanket itself has decomposed. The netting that held the wood fibers in place, it's all gone. And what it did is it made an environment for the grass seed to germinate. But more importantly, it held the soil, the topsoil, so it didn't wash down and eventually end up in one of the ponds or the river. Now, you can see the grass isn't that green right now because we're in high summer and have had very little rain. And we don't water this up here. There's no irrigation system, so I think it's doing very well. But up near the house, well, that's a different story because we have the garden up there. So there, I've turned to rainwater harvesting to help me with that problem. Sean Hadley is an expert when it comes to looking for ways to conserve water. And I was able to ask him to explain how the system I'm going to use here at the Garden Home Retreat will work. Well, Sean, it sounds like you're already underway.
Yes, Alan, we're just getting started.
What is the red line here, or the pink line?
Well, the red line is the outline of the excavation. It's the excavation footprint. And so that's about 2 to 3 feet larger than actual cistern size.
How deep will they go with this hole when they set it in?
Well, you have about 6,000 gallons of storage in this specific cistern, and so this hole will go down about 6 feet. The actual cistern will be 4 feet, and then I'll have 2 feet of cover on top.
Okay, so they'll put topsoil, 2 feet of topsoil over the top.
Excellent growing medium for your croquet lawn.
Lovely. Now, the actual cistern itself is made out of these plastic blocks.
Yes, I've got a couple samples over here. You want to take a look?
I sure would. That'd be great.
If you can make macaroni and cheese, you can put together these rain tanks. Keegan here is assembling a single unit. He started with the rectangular unit. There's only 2 pieces. You have the rectangular unit, and then you have the square pieces. The rain tank system comes in 5 different sizes, if you will. You've got a single, you have a double, you have a triple, you have a quad, and then you have a pent unit. For this specific project, we did select the triple unit because it maximizes the storage capacity with the available area that we have.
Sean, the way I see these systems, really, and particularly here, see it as an insurance policy for my garden because weather patterns these days seem so unpredictable.
And that's exactly why you want a rainwater harvesting system, because you want to capture, you want to bank the water for when it's not raining. And so when it's raining, you store it. When it's not raining, you use the water. And in a typical year, on your property here, you may capture as much as 500,000 gallons of water.
Half a million?
That's like the size of 2 Olympic swimming pools. That's a lot of water.
That is, heavens. And with the hole underway, what's the next step?
Well, the next step, we're going to complete the hole, and then we set the tank. Once the tank is set, we backfill. And then after backfilling, it's time to connect all the downspouts. We'll put in the basket filters, and then you're ready to start collecting rain.
Man, that is so exciting. I can't tell you how thrilling it is to do rainwater harvesting here and take care of this garden in a very responsible way.
It's a very exciting opportunity. You are ahead of most people in that you've thought about this at the ground level, at the design stage, and now you're able to reap the rewards of rainwater harvesting.
So we're harvesting rainwater. We're storing it to use in the garden. That's great, but it's really not enough if you want to be as green as you possibly can. You got to think about things like weed control. I'd really try not to use hard chemicals to take care of weeds in my garden and the lawn. You know, what you want to do is you want to take a proactive approach, not a reactive approach. In other words, you want to do things that help stop the weeds before they occur. Here are a couple of tips. Think about ways to block weeds from getting into your garden. Barrier fabrics, mulches of all types, and even rings that fit around trees are ideal ways to smother weeds before they become a nuisance. Believe it or not, weeds don't have to be a source of frustration for you. That's because you can wipe out an entire generation of weeds by treating your lawn and garden now with a pre-emergent herbicide. Of course, when using any type of herbicide, you should always use caution. Chemicals can be harmful to you, your children, and your pets. However, in recent years, an all-natural pre-emergent herbicide has been developed. Here's what happens. Last fall, like many of the flowers in your garden, weeds drop seed in your flower beds and they'll begin to germinate soon. However, this corn gluten can keep those weed seed from actually sprouting. Now, it's important to understand that no matter what type of pre-emergent you use, it will have the same effect on some of those desirable volunteer plants in your garden as it will on the weeds. When I say volunteers, I mean those flowers that reseed each fall to bloom again next year, like bachelor buttons and spider flower. Now, for some homeowners, taking care of a lawn can be a real challenge. But I met up with Jim Sparks, who builds golf courses all over the country. And he tells us about some of the problems they face and the lessons we can learn from the work his team implements. Jim, this is a fantastic view. It's just gorgeous. You've been creating golf courses for over 20 years. What do you consider some of the most important elements for an outstanding golf course?
Probably the natural topography that we get to work with, the water features, the existing trees. What Mother Nature gives us is the best. If you can take what she gives you and create a golf course, those projects always turn out the best.
Everyone who sees a golf course says, oh my gosh, I'd love for my lawn to look like that. What suggestions or tips would you give someone who wanted a golf course quality lawn?
Basically, a golf course is a lawn on a big scale, and
yeah.
It truthfully is. And what's very important for a golf course is the soil type, the mixture of the sand and the topsoil, and sometimes a peat to retain a little bit of water. And the drainage is very important.
Sand adds to porosity, which helps with the drainage.
That's correct. And the drainage, the extra drainage to get the water away from the root zone. And the most important thing for any living organism is air, whether it's coming through the roots, taken up through the roots as for a plant, or through the foliage. And that's very important also, air movement in a landscape. And as you can see out here on this golf course, it's wide open. We have a lot of air movements, and it helps our turf.
What about what I call the chemical fix? You know, I know folks will see their lawn not doing well in certain areas, and I think the first response is, hey, let's put some more fertilizer on it.
Right. It's sometimes that's the worst thing that you can do, because if there's not enough air in the soil, not enough drainage, it just compounds your problem. So I would suggest, and what we do on the golf course, we periodically test the soils and test it for pH and the drainability. And it's easy to have that tested by your local agent, or there are testing sites across the nation that you could find, but it's well worth the time to do that up front.
While Jim and his crew create beautiful lawns for golfers, Hank Goyers, a Dutch nurseryman, creates landscapes that specialize in grasses of another kind, the ornamental varieties. I had a chance to visit Hank in his private garden in Holland. I think one of the biggest trends in gardening has been the embrace of grasses and the use of them in gardens.
Yes, these plants are getting more and more popular, especially here in Europe. Especially the English people like them very, very much.
Yes, and we're seeing an increase in the use of them in America as well.
I think it's a nice plant because it is even nice when it's getting dormant. Even in October, November, it's still very nice.
Yes, as it goes to sleep, its form is still there. They're even nice in the winter with snow on them.
With snow on it, yeah.
Yeah. How many different varieties of grasses do you grow in your nursery, Hank?
We grow about 25 different varieties, but because it's getting more and more popular, we are expanding our range.
I've got a grass over here I want to show you. It's one I've grown for the first time this year, and I'm very impressed with it. You see, this is one called champagne pink. And just look at these little inflorescents. Aren't they fabulous? What a gorgeous color. What's great about this plant is that the foliage is this glaucous gray color. And it grows to about 18 inches, and then the plumes come up to about 2 feet. So it's the perfect size for this area of the garden. And when you plant it next to something like this artist series of ageratum or these beautiful supertunias, Vista Bubblegum Pink, well, I mean, you've got a knockout combination. Now, what's great about ornamental grasses, if you don't have room to grow them like this, you can grow them in containers. They're the perfect accent for all kinds of foliage plants and bloomers. They're a beautiful accent in little tiny gardens that you can create in a couple of containers, so you really should give them a try. And just look at these. Here we are in the heat of summer, and they're performing beautifully with all of these annuals. A great addition to the garden. I get a lot of questions about how to grow a successful, beautiful lawn. And there's some things you need to keep in mind if that's your goal. The first thing is you need to match the grass variety to your region of the world. And you need to keep in mind that certainly the amount of light you get plays a role in the success of the grass. The more sun, the better usually. The next thing you want to do is get the soil right. You see, it needs to be well drained. Grasses don't like soggy spots. So if you've got some of those areas in your lawn now, you might check on the drainage. The other thing in summer, when it gets really hot like it is today, you want to make sure that the grass is a little longer than you usually cut it. Here I'm cutting this grass about 1.5 inches long. That's about a 1/2 inch longer than I usually leave it. This helps shade the roots of the grass, cuts down on the amount of water I have to use, and it just seems happier that way. Now when it comes to water, you want to make sure that you water at off time. It's best to water early in the morning, very early, like 5 a.m. This gives the lawn an opportunity to dry out before nightfall, a time when various types of fungus are the most active. This is also usually a non-peak time for most communities' water supply. It's also much better to water early, only a couple of times a week, rather than to lightly water more often. You see, deep soaking encourages deep root growth, whereas light watering encourages the roots to stay close to the surface of the soil, making your lawn more susceptible and vulnerable to heat and drought. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that an actively growing lawn this time of year will require about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of water per week. This, of course, will depend on your soil type. Now, when it comes to feeding, I think fertilizing once, maybe twice over the entire growing season is plenty. You see, the more you fertilize, the more grass you're going to have to cut with a mower. Lawns can be a source of pride. Just don't let the summer heat and drought get the most of it and you. Now, if you want to grow flowers like this, well, that's a whole nother story. You really have to feed these. They're heavy feeders. This Salvia superba, this gorgeous velvet Supertunia, and then Lantana all perform great in the heat. Now I want to talk to you about a project that I'm undergoing to deal with the exuberance you get from flower beds and the exuberance from the grass this time of year. I'm putting in a row of brick right against the raised beds. What this allows me to do is roll the lawnmower over this, and I can cut the grass, and I don't have to take a line trimmer and trim this part of the garden. It also affords me about 8 inches of clearance for these plants to spill over before they start touching the lawn. So I can have these Supertunias, Royal Velvet spill over along with the Lantanas and all sorts of beauties along here. And since we're all concerned about fuel prices and the environment, I wanted to show you some of my natural lawnmowers. Come on this way. Well, here they are, 22 natural lawnmowers. And when they're not enjoying a treat of whole corn, which I give them for a command performance, of which they're giving you now, they're out here mowing off this grass. What a great way to keep the pasture slick and pretty. I recently received a letter and a photograph from Susan in Colorado. And you can see her house here, and one of the things she wants to look at is removing this hedge that runs across the front of her house. Now if you look closely at this house, you'll see that behind the hedge there's actually a crescent-shaped driveway that does something like this. And Susan, I think, has just become tired of this hedge. She indicated that she wanted something that bloomed. Now this is in Colorado, so water is an issue. We need to pick plants that are somewhat drought tolerant. You might not think so, but roses actually are somewhat drought tolerant, particularly old-fashioned shrub roses. So she could plant this, say, with a pink blooming one like Sarah Van Fleet, or something that has a gorgeous hip, the fruit of the rose that occurs in the fall and winter. Or I saw at a nursery in California a wonderful rose called Rosa chinensis mutabilis, or the butterfly rose. Okay, now that you've seen the rose, you can see where I'm going with the color, because with mutabilis, or the butterfly rose, you get this range of pink all the way through salmon to yellow, which will work really well with the brick color of this house. Now, one other thing I might add, which has nothing to do with planting but with color, is, Susan, you might consider taking a sort of dove gray, a muddy gray that sort of picks up the color of your roof here, and remove the white and paint all the trim and the pediment and the garage and the pediment of the garage that putty gray, and I think it would all blend so beautifully. Now, one of the things to think about in any area, if you're wanting to know what will grow, just visit a local nursery. You can get lots of good advice there and see what they're selling, or go to a botanic garden. And certainly in Colorado, you have a wonderful botanic garden right there in Denver, which showcases lots of different types of roses. Susan, I hope that these suggestions will be helpful to you as you make improvements to your property. In this show on grass and turf, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that in the garden home, we view the turf as the rug of the landscape. A lush lawn is like a fine carpet. Now, if we move a little closer to the house, away from the lawn, there's a wide range of outdoor rugs to choose from these days, ranging from natural to synthetic fibers. As we've been designing both the interior and exterior spaces of the Garden Home Retreat, the type of rug that we'll be using indoors came up. So I visited a factory where they're keeping alive an old art form called hook rugs. In fact, you may be interested to know that some of the rugs in the White House were made this way. When I visited McCallion Home, they took me across the street to their sister company where they were actually working on a rug for the green room of the White House. Jason Sumner tells us more. Now, Jason, tell me what's going on here.
Well, sure. This is a very special day in the world of spinning wheel rugs.
Oh, really?
We are in the process of starting the rug for the green room in the White House.
Really?
What we're doing is hooking rug on monk's cloth. You can see he can pretty much guide this needle not just up and down or left and right. It follows a curvilinear pattern.
Now, other than him using a hand machine, this is really a traditional method for making hook rugs.
Absolutely. We've been making rugs in this building since the late 1930s. My grandfather, Frank McCallion, the founder of this company, as the story goes, he drove down south because he had heard that the local people here hooked rugs. A lot of it from simple fabrics and pieces of cloth, because it was during the Depression. Things were tough. As the story goes, he went to the chamber and asked, are there people here who would like a job? And they said, let's add it tomorrow. And that's how we started. Many people in this area have this skill.
That is fascinating. Well, I look at these floral motifs on this. I see the great cornucopia. Mm-hmm. And I understand how you might make a geometric pattern rug, but these floral motifs, I was never sure how they did all these swirls and curls and cascades and flowers.
Right. Well, they call this a magic needle, and that's the reason they call it a magic needle. It can virtually move like a crayon.
So, Jason, he's really working in reverse here, isn't he?
That's right. It's actually upside down in reverse because he's making the rug on the back of the rug. The face of the rug on the other side is where the pile is being created.
So the rug itself is coming to life on the other side. We're seeing the back side here.
Correct. That's absolutely correct.
I can see that there are a lot of colors that are very popular today in it.
Yes, there are.
Look at that gorgeous cornucopia.
Yes.
That is just really fantastic.
Consider that hook rugs is really a North American art form. Didn't come from Europe, it's really a North American art form.
Well, they really are gorgeous, and this is colossal. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Alan.
Aren't those rugs just incredible? The patterns, the colors, all derived from nature. They really are fascinating. I hope you've enjoyed today's show as much as I have. We've learned a little bit about conserving water, as well as keeping those weeds out of your garden in a safe way. I hope before the summer's out that you'll kick off your shoes and find yourself some lush green grass and run across it. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Allen Smith's Garden Home.
We'll take a look at a group of bikers going on a ride to share the message of planting trees. And we'll have a visit to the Garden Home Retreat by an arborist who goes to work on one of the big oaks. And we'll find out why regular pruning is really important. Plus, we'll talk about how trees can save us money and energy, not to mention the resale value of your home. It's a busy show with lots of tips for homeowners. I hope you'll join me in the Garden Home.